Welcome to Purpose 360. I'm Carol Cohn, and today more than ever before, companies, brands, and their partners need to stand for something beyond the bottom line. I've created this program to provide insights and ideas to share with you so that you can apply them to your work the very next day. The goal here is to up-level your purpose and to benefit companies and society. So please join us. We have a delicious discussion today. Now that should intrigue you because with us today is Andy Pharoah, Vice President of Corporate Affairs and Sustainability at Mars, Inc. Being private gives them some freedom to think differently about purpose. But until some years ago, the family was very close to the vest. They didn't share a lot about what they were doing, but they had marvelous brands. I mean, brands that we all love. Snickers and Milky Way and Skittles. And if you've got animals, you've got, Whiskers and Pedigree. And I love greenies for my pets. And then they've got, vet clinics. And then they also have Wrigley Orbit Gum. And they also have cutting edge new nutritional products. The Mars Edge. And by the way, I just ordered one, Cocoa Viva, I think it is. So Andy's going to correct me, I think, on that one. But the family felt that the world has changed and that transparency today is demanded by our younger consumers. And I hate to call them consumers. Let's call them citizens. What's behind the company? What does it stand for? How can it have a better impact on the world? What's it doing to impact and help with the climate change in front of us? What about our nutritional needs, our health needs? And the company set out in 2017, 2018 to discover and codify its purpose. Its purpose? The world we want tomorrow is the way we do business today. Let me say it again. The world we want tomorrow is the way we do business today. And that was built upon fundamental principles that the company was operating on for decades. But then it also gave them a guide. And also they created a compass to help them make decisions so that the decisions they made today would help create the world tomorrow. Andy has been with the company for many years. He worked in their Wrigley division. And in 2016, he gained this top job at Mars Corporate. And he is a recent winner of a very esteemed recognition, the Individual Achievement Award from Provoke, which is one of the top marketing, communications, and public relations organizations. It was a SABRE Award that he won in May. He's also a member of the Page Society, which is the top corporate communications leaders in the world, and he works for an amazing company. So welcome, Andy.
Thank you very much. And it is, in fact, Cocoa Via. And actually, you've talked about food and chocolate, but actually, by far, our biggest business is actually Petcare.
Oh, you're right. Oh my God, my cats would destroy me if I didn't say that.
We own over 2,000 veterinary hospitals around the world. So it's
and I know Banfield. I see that all the time, and then VCA.
Yep.
And I love your approach. We're going to dive into all of this. Your approach to nutrition, not just for human beings, but you talk a lot about the humanization of how we relate to our pets. And I'm thrilled because, my fur babies are my babies. So we're going to get into that. I always like to start with the numbers. So Mars was founded in 1911. Its headquarters are now in McLean, Virginia. Its revenues are around, it's a privately held company, but when you read some of the business press, it's around $40 billion with a tremendous wind at its back because of its philosophy. And we're going to get into its purpose philosophy in a moment. It has over 125 associates in 80 countries around the globe. So that's a little bit by the numbers. So with that, Andy, let's just talk about your background and how have you seen the transparency of business as well as the evolution of purpose change throughout your career?
My background is perhaps a little bit unique for people in my position. I actually started working in politics in the UK when I came out of college. And I really worked in sort of the political sector for a number of years before moving into agency. I was with Hill and Knowlton for over a decade. And before moving to Wrigley, and then Wrigley was acquired by Mars, and I worked in a couple of different places for Wrigley. Both I was based in Munich, then based in Chicago, before moving into my current role, based in McLean, Virginia. And I think when I left politics and moved more into the private sector, I thought I had to make a choice between what I believed and what I felt passionately about, and what was my job. And that essentially politics and a belief around a better world was what I did. I did it the weekends and evenings, and what I did during the week was what I was, commercially valuable for, where my skills could be most used. And for me, the really big unlocker from coming to Mars was this gradual realization that the two are linked. And that business can and should be a fundamental force for good. And great companies are companies that let their associates really be themselves and really bring their full self to life. And so I think what we're seeing with purpose increasingly is this kind of recognition that companies are far more than just a vehicle for employing people and making money. They are actors in society, and they can play both a positive and negative role. And if you recognize that, then you really need to set a direction. I think that's where the good stuff of purpose comes from. And as we think about Mars ourselves, if you just truly think about it, if you have purpose but your business doesn't perform, you're going to be completely ineffective. But equally, if all you do is deliver performance without any purpose, it is almost meaningless. And so it's really about sort of connecting purpose and performance to really build a better business that can make a positive contribution to the world.
And I'm glad you said that, because I pulled this quote up for you, and I'd just like to reiterate it. Performance without purpose is meaningless. And I think that's fantastic. Now, can you share the purpose of Mars? It's a very simple statement, but it's very powerful.
Yeah, I mean, it's simply this. The world we want tomorrow starts with how we do business today. And it was a purpose that we really curated from the business sort of over 17 and 18, and then launched at the beginning of 2019. And it was really an outside, the articulation of what we'd long believed. There's really three things that make Mars unique. It takes a very long-term approach. It views things in generations, not quarters. It's family-owned, and the family want it to remain family-owned for the long term, which gives it a huge amount of freedom. And it's very principles-driven. The 5 principles of Mars, you'll see them everywhere inside the company. You'll see major business decisions being made against them. And really, that purpose is the articulation of those things, and this belief that each and every day our 125,000 associates have an ability to really make a difference to the world. And it's been incredibly powerful during these COVID times. Our chief executive, Grant Reed, around a number of very big financial decisions that we've made, simply asked the question, how does this contribute to the world we want tomorrow? And so it played a really powerful role in helping make decisions on some really tough stuff.
Can you give us an example?
How long do we continue to pay people for when they can't go to work? And we've continued to pay them throughout. We had to stroke increase the sick leave provisions of 75,000 associates, so they didn't have to make a choice between doing the right thing for their family or their health and coming to work and losing income. The decisions that we made, the pay protection guarantee that we gave all we gave all our associates. The fact that right throughout, we said the number one priority was associate safety, and every decision was based around associate safety. And when we looked to perhaps at some third-party contractors who work with our business, trying to make sure that through their employers they are not treated in a different way to our own associates.
And what kind of feedback did you get from your employees when you took these actions?
No, I think we've had a very good response. Obviously, I think it's differed in a way. We've got older parts of the business and the newer parts of the business. I think for people who've been with Mars a long time, none of this surprises them, because that's really how we've been. I think with people who've been with Mars for less of a time, that it does surprise me. And say something like veterinary health, where we've been in veterinary health since the mid 1990s, but we have, in the past 5 or 6 years, our presence has dramatically increased. And I think you certainly saw with the vet health associates an even stronger reaction, because what we were doing is so different to the rest of the industry. In the broader CPG of the business, we were competing against some good and principled companies, and they will have done some of the things that we've done as well. But in veterinary health, it is really so different to what is the norm.
And I'm curious, was Banfield deemed essential during COVID?
Yes. I mean, in veterinary health, in pretty much all places, was deemed essential. Sometimes you had situations that sometimes Banfields are situated within PetSmarts. So sometimes, you may have had a retail closure. Some countries deemed some form of primary care as non-essential, but secondary care essential. So it did differ from country to country, but broadly speaking, it was seen as essential, and as indeed was our food manufacturing businesses, whether they be for humans or for pets.
Let's talk about the discovery of your purpose statement. You said that in 2017 and 2018, you really talked about it, you touched it, you probed it, you felt it. What was the process, and how many of your employees were engaged in the discovery and the creation?
Yeah, I mean, so really what happened was sort of April 2017, the board and the management team came together, and we were looking at the what was important for the long term of the business. And I was quite surprised to see, from a sort of an open-ended discussion, a non-prompted discussion, what happened was there was a really strong belief that Mars needed to be differentiated on purpose to be successful in the long term. And that was quite a change. You've talked earlier on about how Mars historically has been quite secretive. And so it's historically have not been very high profile. And so the idea that the board and the management team really thought that actually not only do we need to be externally focused, and we'd started being much more externally focused from probably around 2015, 2016, but actually to differentiate ourselves and what we stand for was quite surprising. For me, I was slightly surprised, delighted, but slightly surprised. And so we began the process, and we'd looked at purpose before, and always before it had fallen down, because I think for a couple of reasons. One is that we've got these incredibly powerful 5 principles. We've got a family that owns the company whose name is above the door, and many of them have the name Mars. And so, what the purpose of Mars is, it has to relate to actually what they feel their purpose is. It's quite personal. And we'd done a very, very traditional process whereby you'd go through all these layers of research, and you would come up with a final answer. Ta-ta! And do you like it? Do you not like it? We did it completely differently this time. What we did was, right from the start, we said, everybody knows what makes Mars unique. It's long term, it's family ownership, it's the 5 principles. So rather than trying to get to a single purpose, we started by writing 5 or 6 different purposes based on those. And then we worked with the family across 3 generations to really get what they felt. So really, this was at the start with, led from the family, that then involving the board and the management team. We then used associates through this prototyping process to really test things. We tested statements, and we did a lot from mobile phones, and that associate data was incredibly powerful and helpful, particularly when it came to sort of talking to groups of family members. When if somebody said I like A and somebody said I like B, so well, okay, you've got a good point. Both of them are great, However, 80% of our associates really think A works for them. And that really added a degree of objectivity. And the family really saw that the world we want tomorrow, the idea of us actually setting a direction, being clear on what the world we want, that really chimed with them. And it's starting with how we do business, and how we do business is the 5 principles. We knew that it's hard to differentiate yourself purely on the basis that you've got principles. It's quite hard because most people have got principles. And for principles to differentiate you, you actually need to feel them in action. And so if you set a destination, which is the world we want tomorrow, and then say that every day, each and every action you do needs to be measured to the extent that it's contributing to it, then it's really a practical way of showing how the principles can come to light.
And the principles, by the way, a lot of companies have like 5 bullets. Here they are. Yours have depth behind them. And I love the one in quality where I think the first one, the sub-bullet was the consumer is the boss.
Yep.
I thought that was really, really important. Are any of the other principles, perhaps, Andy, why don't you name them? And then, because I also like mutuality, and maybe there's some sub-bullets under some of the principles that you really find come up a lot for you.
So it's quality, responsibility, freedom, efficiency, and mutuality. I think the trick with them is that there is a degree of tension in them. There is a tension between efficiency and quality. There is a tension between freedom. And when we see freedom, that's probably the most misunderstood principle. When we say the freedom principle is basically, it says, to remain free, we need not to have high debt levels. We need not to be dependent on other people. And in order to do that, we need to be profitable. So you've said the consumer is our, it's our boss. If you talk about, mutuality, it's the idea that a shared benefit will endure. And so each of them have, clear descriptors. There is tension between them. And the trick in any decision is to balance all of them. You don't just use one of them. Every business decision would be incredibly easy if you said our only principle is efficiency, or our only principle is quality. So you have to use them in tandem, and that forces a dialogue. And really, pretty much any decision that we make, the 5 principles are used as a frame, and they don't give you a simple answer. And that's good, actually, because if it doesn't give you a simple answer, actually means you have to discuss, to some extent, what is the tensions and what are the trade-offs between them.
What's the process? I mean, do you have meeting after meeting? Do you have a certain meeting format to discuss the tension? How many layers, if there are layers that you need to go through to get to a solution? I'm sure our listeners are very curious about how this works out.
These are just integrated into how we do business. So and we would have various, approval procedures as you would expect in most companies. And, you will, as you make a decision on sustainability or on a program or on any business decision, that the frame that business leaders at Mars have really been taught to think about it is around the 5 principles. And so it's not a separate process. It's not an audit. It's actually a doctrine and approach that leaders are expected to apply throughout the whole business, and discuss and debate those the changes that you want to make and how they fit with those principles.
So let's pivot, because the principles help to be the fabric, I believe, of the Mars Sustainable in a Generation plan. And I know that plan is also anchored by select SDGs, and it has 3 key areas. Because the principles are how you run your business, how you make decisions, I guess, with authenticity and truth. So share with our listeners the Sustainable in a Generation plan, because I love its 3 pillars.
So we've been active on sustainability probably. I mean, you could probably go back in the history annals and say there's lots of things that we've done about doing things sustainability. But In reality, probably the first time we really set clear global targets for that were around 2008, where we basically said we wanted to get to be sustainable in a generation, and we set targets to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions from our direct operations, that take it down to zero by 2040. And we set a bunch of interim targets for sort of 2015 on a range of things from packaging weight to water use, obviously, carbon emissions. And that really was something we talked about internally. It got very well baked into our supply chain. And as we were sort of coming up to sort of 2015, we started to think, well, okay, we've got 2015 targets. What should they be for the longer term? And we started to do some real deep mapping. And what we came to understand through that kind of mapping of our footprint was that our direct operations are a tiny part. 6% of our operations, 6% of our impact is from our direct operations. And actually, if you look at our greenhouse gas emissions, our actual total impact is equivalent to a small country, a country like Panama. So when we started was when we mapped in more detail on our greenhouse gas emissions and our impact on society. We came down to really three key areas where we needed to set, we thought, whole impact targets. And they were around healthy planet, which was really led around climate, but it included targets on land use and water. Thriving people, which was really talking about income in the supply chain, the extended supply chain, and human rights. And then nourishing wellbeing. How do our products, portfolio, and service, how do they make things better? And we set very comprehensive targets for our whole operations, including stuff that happens, thousands of miles from the factory walls. And we set targets to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 67%. Target to improve the lives of a million people. A target to actually, despite the growth of our business, to hold our land use flat, or the land use associated with our business flat. And these were long-term targets. We committed $1 billion, $1 billion investment over the next few years. We've actually already spent that now. It was interesting at the time. The $1 billion got the coverage. I think really much more was bigger actually what truly we were committing to. And I think we've made good progress along it. We have over the last 2 years decoupled the growth of our business from growth in carbon emissions. And for those of you people that are deeply concerned about the environmental performance of a business, this is in some ways the holy grail. Can you have a more successful, bigger business while actually reducing your impact? And so we now find we're at, say, 53% renewable energy. We're well on our way to the 100%. We're about 20% through our goal of making a difference to 1 million people in supply chain. So I think that there's very good progress that has been made on it. And one of the big switches we made with it was this recognition that we needed to talk about it. And why did we talk about it? I think there were really three reasons. Honestly, if you can't find your voice on issues around that have a huge impact on the world, what are you going to talk about? And so I think it was imperative. I think the second reason is that when you look beyond your direct operations, you can't solve it yourself. If I look on carbon, 80% of the impact comes from either agriculture or deforestation. We don't own farms on the whole, and we don't own forests. And so we have to work in partnership. And so by raising topics, by raising issues, we can try, one, to push others to act, because it's not much good also if just Panama acts, nobody else does. And we need partners. We need partners. Many of the companies we work with face the same challenges we do. So it was about that. And then the third thing that was really core to it was consumers and associates, and we call our employees associates. Consumers are associates, and people we would like to work for us, or people we would like to want to work for us, really care about what a company stands for. And that's changed. My children, who are in their early 20s, asked very different questions about companies than most of my contemporaries did 30 years earlier. And so we knew that it was important, and that it was important that we took a stand, and it was important that Mars and our brand reflected what we were doing around sustainability.
And I'm curious how much of that, obviously, that was trends that were happening in culture with millennials and Gen Z, transparency. How much of that was coming from the family?
I mean, the family had always been concerned about these issues, and the family are not immune to the same trends that happen. To many intensive purposes, they're just like any people of their age. You've got Generation 4 who are predominantly on the board now, and deeply concerned about the environment. They have those kind of similar views. So I think it was not, the idea, and they've always had a very, very strong belief that they want Mars to make a positive difference to the world. They want to be really proud of their business. I think what the switch has been, there have been two switches. The first switch has been recognizing that in order to do that, we also need to talk about it. So we were a company that actually done quite a lot of good things for a long time. But we tended to say, you know what, let's not make the company famous, we want our brands to be famous. And so there was a switch. There was a switch about saying, look, actually, we recognise that we externally need to talk about these things. So that was partly behind it. And I think the second thing is that they wanted very clearly to really define a set of shareholder objectives for the company that were broader than just financial performance. And that's really where the Mars Compass came in, where they actually set out, very broad objectives for the company, of which sustainability and generation is a core part of it.
Thanks for bridging to the compass, because I'd love to read a quote from your CEO, Grant Reed. A sailing ship with a clear destination in mind can only plot a course, successfully navigate the wind and the currents, and avoid the rocks if it has a trusted captain, a great crew, and a compass. A business is no different. Our aim with the Mars Compass is to steer us towards creating value for society, the planet, and for Mars. A compass or any business model that orients only toward financial performance is neither sustainable nor desirable. I think that's a wonderful statement. And I know that Grant has mentioned that in his videos that you have on the website. I'm sure he's done it at various interviews and such. How has that brought the compass to it humanizes the compass, and has that really helped with the advancement of these next actions?
Yeah, I mean, actually, interestingly, we've not talked about the compass hugely externally. We've only started to talk about it externally. It was the product of a couple of years of work where really Generation 4 of the family, together with some of the members of the management team, really worked to really try to, they'd always knew that Mars stood for more. How do you truly codify that into a set of objectives? And so we came up with this model really around 4 quadrants, as it was called at the time. One was of financial performance, but not looking at the short term, looking at how you do over the medium to long term. So 3-year, 10-year financial performance. Quality of growth, recognizing that financial performance is backward looking. So you want to have some metrics that are actually a little bit more forward looking. Are you well positioned for the future rather than did you have a good last 10 years? Positive societal impact. I mean, is your business having a positive impact upon the world? And that we primarily measure through the Sustainable Generation plan. And then the final quadrant was really, are you a trusted partner with society? And we chose to really look at that through, what's our reputation? What are the trust levels that we have of associates? And at the very center of this was the purpose. And so it really was a really clear codification of what the shareholders expected from the board and from the management team in terms of running the business. And this is incredibly important because every year the Mars family puts back over 90% of the money that the company makes into the business. And so that's the choice that they've taken. They've taken that choice as opposed to say, let's take the money out of the business and start a foundation. And so there is a real need for them that the business is actually positively contributing to the world, that they can be proud of the business and know that they don't just own a successful business, they own a business that is making a positive impact throughout. And so the compass has been incredibly important, and we've used it throughout COVID. We report back on it to the family. We use it to frame our board discussions. And of course, there are tensions. There are tensions between, performing well today and being well positioned for the future. There are tensions between what do you invest in a sustainability program that might pay you, that might have an economic return, but might only have an economic return in a decade or so. There can be a reputational impact actually about talking about some of the challenges that there are in the sustainability. So there's tensions between all elements of the compass, but it's incredibly important tool. The family are very vested in it. It's how the performance of the board and the management team are measured, and our top 300 leaders have got compensation tied against all aspects of the compass. So it is important. I think it's, for us, many companies have very strong programs on sustainability or on corporate responsibility or on things like that. Often they tend to be either, chairman or CEO led, and that's super. But chairman and chairs and CEOs do change. What the advantage we have is actually this comes from the shareholders. This comes from the owners, and so it's going to endure. Beyond the tenure of any set of leaders at Mars. And so I think it becomes even more powerful because of that.
Very baked into the business.
Yes.
Very much of the oxygen in your bloodstream. So you've got the sustainable in a generation plan, you've got the compass, you got the principles, took years to develop many of these. So let's just turn to what's current news.
Mm-hmm.
The Black Lives Matter movement and the anger and the pain and the rage that has been just, ignited across our country and are now around the world. How have you used the compass and your other guides to make decisions? And I'm also very specifically would like to know about Uncle Ben's as a brand and what's also going to happen to that.
Yeah, okay. Let's take that perhaps in two parts. Look, there can be no room for racial discrimination in a healthy society. There can be no room for racial discrimination in any company or any community. But we recognize that exists. And to change, it needs collective action at every level. It's heartbreaking what is happening. What's even more heartbreaking is that what is news to many people is just an everyday reality to Black Americans, particularly if we're taking from a US standpoint. Although it would be the same if one went to France or went to Germany or one went to the UK. What becomes news is someone else's is reality. You have to be I think at times like this, particularly when you're thinking about your company, there are times when talk can be incredibly cheap. It's easy to say something, but there are times also when it's disproportionately important to actually say something, because silence implies complicitness, and so that's generally the approach that we have taken. We've believed. We've not done things. We think we can do a lot through our brands. We think we can do a lot through us taking action as a company and as brands, as opposed to adverts. And so that's been very much our approach. And so we have had actually quite a detailed inclusive marketing program for some time. And we track how we're doing. We track what is the image we are creating of a wide range of groups of society. And we certainly track ethnic diversity and how are we portraying something, because people see us communicating to them all the time on the through various media, and we have an ability to kind of role model what is the world we want tomorrow through how we talk to consumers through our brands. You specifically asked about Uncle Ben's. Uncle Ben's is a global brand. It's a brand that we've had since the 1940s, and It's a brand that we recognise that there are, there are significant problems with the brand in terms of its name and its packaging. It is to an extent based on a racial stereotype that is outdated and is just not relevant in today's world. And so we made the call and we communicated that we needed. We know that we need to make a change. We're going through that. We're talking to our associates. We're talking to communities. We're talking to organisations. The home of the brand in the US is the Mississippi Delta. The town of Greenville, Mississippi. We're talking with the mayor, and we are moving quickly on this. We will be taking action, and we will be communicating it. And I think that's exactly the right thing to do.
And if you hadn't gone through the purpose discovery, the principles definition, and the compass, where do you think you would be trying to make this decision on Uncle Ben's without them?
Well, to be fair, we've had the principles. The principles are really of how Mars has done business. Really since the 1930s, and they were codified in the 1980s. So we've always had that. We've always had those principles. I don't think. I know it'd be easy to say, because we've got the purpose and the compass, that it makes it easier to make a decision on Uncle Ben's. I don't think it is. It's just, if you when you seriously look at it and you look at this world in which we're in, the image and what that terminology means to some groups of people and how it makes them feel, you simply know you have to change.
You simply know you have to change. Great. Well, thank you for that. I'd like to turn to a lighter topic, which is you have a tremendous commitment to your pet care business. And it's not just the food or the vet clinics. I mean, you are doing things such as creating better cities for pets. And you're really having these ecosystem scalable ideas and then initiatives. Can you talk about how that happens in that division and perhaps one or two of your greatest successes regarding pets? Because I love animals.
At the corporate level, we have a purpose of the world we want tomorrow starts with how we do business today. And then each of our segments has its own purpose. And the pet care segment has had a long established purpose, which is about creating a better world for pets. And really, every aspect of what they do is about creating a better world for pets because the benefit, because pets make our lives better. I'm a pet owner. You're a pet owner. We know that pets improve our lives. We know that pets help children study at school, help people fit in communities. We even know in prisons when people are adopting pets, they change people's behaviors. And so through this purpose, we can really look at everything that we want to do. And so we are really looking at what are the barriers that prevent people from having the life-affirming experience of owning a pet, and what are the barriers that stop dogs and cats and pets being adopted and being in shelters. So if you look at it, both our campaign to end pet homelessness together with our Better Cities for Pets campaign, they really work well. And Better Cities for Pets is about how do you make it easier for people for pets to coexist in a city? Do you have, for example, is the standard rental contract or standard rental lease, does it assume that you shouldn't have a pet? Are you able to have pets at outdoor dining in restaurants? Is there green space on which you can walk to? So we've been working really with mayors. Started in the US, it started in Franklin, Tennessee. But now it's really expanded globally, and we think we can do a lot. And actually, pet-friendly cities are better cities to be. They're more attractive. They're better. Get retail better. The house. It's good for homeowners having a more pet-friendly city. So you see that when you look at ending pet homelessness, we think there's a lot we can do with our brands. Pedigree have done a lot. I mean, during COVID, for example, we did Dogs on Zoom, recognizing that people were not able to go into shelters to the same extent, yet there was quite a big demand for people to have pets at home, actually linking up and to allow people to see dogs on Zoom and adopt dogs over Zoom, of course, with sufficient safeguards.
And I know that a lot of the shelters were just cleaned out. which is great. I just hope that people will be responsible when they have more of a returning to the new normal.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, and I think it was great to see some adoption. It wasn't all good. We did see some pets being abandoned in parts of the world. We did see some places where people erroneously thought pets were a problem. I think if you look at it, on a serious note, as people return to the office or those who have been at home, it's going to be, you have to think of the stress that the pet is going to face from having had, having had people around them all the time. We'd also know that in recessions and in economic downturns, we do know that, there are some people who cannot afford pets, and they get returned to shelter. So we're doing what we can, to help on all of these things, including offering, reduced rate veterinary care and, as part of a sort of a COVID donation and certainly working with shelters. But it's, I don't think that, sadly, I don't think it's just, it's just a simple, clear path forward.
You have so many great programs. They're so thoughtful. We're unfortunately coming to the bottom of this interview, but I wanted to just ask you, Andy, do you have a favorite program that, that one of the brands does that you go, oh, it just really warms your heart? I mean, there are so many of them, but I want to know your favorite.
Oh, that's a good question, isn't it? I mean, look, I think if I think about our brands, I think you look at three levels. You've got brands that have got purpose at the very core, and I think Pedigree and its Feed the Good campaign is at its. You've got a really purposeful brand there. You've got brands that have done real purposeful activations. They've done it consistently, built on strong foundations. So Skittles, removing the rainbow to celebrate Pride. Donating the rainbow for Pride. I think that's, and then just generally, I think all of our brands can play an incredibly important part in inclusive marketing to make sure about the imagery we're creating. Maltesers have just done some fantastic.
Oh, the Maltesers! The videos are a riot. They bring great smiles to your face,
and really just breaking stereotypes. So I'm proud of what our brands are doing. I'm proud of what Uncle Ben's will do. It'd be nice if we'd made it earlier, but so I think our brands have an incredibly powerful role to play, and they can really shine a light on issues. They can really, and if it's built on firm fundamentals, what we don't think is purpose is not a cause. It's not cause-related marketing can be from 1 week, 1 quarter to the next. What's our topic of the month? Purpose has to be built on fundamentals, and so if brands are going to be active, it has to be built on really strong foundations and a long-term commitment, and a willingness to stick the course with it, even when people disagree with you.
We always like to end our conversations with 3 insights that you would like to share with your peers to either identify or activate their social purpose in their brand or in their organization. So you could probably do 100, but let's just try and pick 3 here.
Well, actually, I'll have 4, but one of them I've already mentioned. I think the first one, it has to be core to you and your brand. And there is a fundamental difference between having a purpose and adopting a cause. I think the second thing is that purpose is only real if you treat it as a business priority with the same discipline as you would any aspect. The same is true of sustainability. Yeah, you have to treat it with the same discipline as you would a new product launch. You need to do these things in partnership. You cannot do them yourself. And no one has a monopoly on good ideas. We've done work with the Lion's Share, with the Gina Davis Institute on inclusive marketing. We work with a whole bunch of partners on sustainability. So you have to do this in partnership. It has to be about creating a greater good, not just trying to position yourself to gain competitive advantage. And I think the final thing to remember is that you cannot please all of the people all of the time, and that whatever you do, you will meet critics and will meet detractors. And so you can't make your decisions based on what a particular opinion poll is saying or what a particular consumer focus group says. You need to do what you believe is the right thing for you and your company.
I'm curious, do you go to, or do your brands go to focus groups to test purpose ideas?
No, we wouldn't go and say, do you think our purpose should be A or B? We certainly would look at, an activation. If we're doing an activation, what is the two or three ways you could do that. But it would be no different to anything we're doing within the brand. It wouldn't be, because you cannot pick. It's impossible to choose a purpose that everybody agrees on, because if everybody agrees on it,
it's too milquetoast.
And everyone doesn't agree on everything. In every society there are dissenting voices. So I think it really needs to come from the heart and who you are. And if in doubt, don't do it, particularly with your brands. There is a real danger with people kind of issues marketing and jumping on whatever bandwagon particularly appears. And, that might go well for you. It might go badly, but if it's not built on the fundamental truth in your company, if it's not built on what you're actually committing to do, if it isn't real, then it's just simply the wrong thing to do.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I always like to give our guests the last option to add anything else you'd like in this conversation.
Look, I think that we're in a crucial time for business. I think the business has woken up that it needs to make a difference, that consumers care, and that in fact consumers are looking for corporate leadership. And so I think it really is incumbent upon all of us to bring our full selves to that, and to really really help those companies that want to make a difference to do so. And I think we have been living through the biggest test case ever of whether, mission statements and value statements and commitments are simply, words on a piece of paper or on a poster on a wall, or whether they mean anything. And I think these times are really going to separate the sheep from the goats. And I'm hopeful that whichever one is good, the sheep or the goats, that they win, and that we really that we are living through a transformational change. I certainly think on issues of racial justice, we have passed a pivot point around the world, and that things are changing in a way that people will have never expected. And I think so. With all the upset and with all the anger and all the disappointment that I think we all have, I am incredibly optimistic about what is to come.
Well, thank you so much, Andy. This has been an extraordinary conversation, very candid. The fact that you've won the Sabre Award and others, I totally understand why. You're very thoughtful, you're very genuine, and I know that Mars, as an excellent captain, helping to guide its ship to help the company create the world that we want tomorrow, is the way that we do business today. And you're just an extraordinary leader in the company and in the purpose world. And I think we're all very, very fortunate to have you doing what you do.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. I always like to end with my question for our listeners. What is your purpose?